The Samyang 24mm 1.8 FE lens has been praised by pretty much every single reviewer on YouTube and beyond. But there is one major problem with this lens, and in this video I want to talk about it. Now firstly, this isn't a lens review, this is more of a why has no other reviewer picked up on this problem and mentioned it, because I don't think this is isolated just to me. Now I may do a review in the future, or I may send it back. I'm still deciding whether or not I want to keep this lens. One of the big reasons that I'm actually making this video is the fact that I wasn't gifted this lens, I wasn't sent it to review. I actually bought it myself with my hard-earned money, so yes, if this lens isn't as perfect as all the reviews make it out to be, it's gonna bother me. So what's the issue that I've been having? Well, this lens has some major chromatic aberration problems, something that in most reviews has been noted as being minimal or even non-existent. Samyang's own website says, this new tiny lens will make you the master of astrophotography, superb resolution with minimized spherical and coma aberration. Well, I've got some news for you. This lens is not perfect when it comes to astrophotography. And to show you what I mean, let's head into Lightroom and take a look at some of the photos that I've taken with this lens. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom, and this whole set of photos, the reason I've got so many is because originally I was going to do a comparison between the Samyang 2.8 and the Samyang 1.8. Unfortunately, because I've been back and forth with the store that I bought the 1.8 from, I've now sold the 2.8, so I probably won't be doing that video, but at least you can see some comparisons here. So this is the 1.8, this is the newer lens, the one that's meant to be optically superior in every way compared to the 24mm 2.8 you'd have thought, considering the price especially. And if we zoom in here, I mean, you can see how bad the chromatic aberration is against the trees, against the branches. And I know that this is a very demanding situation. You've got the light source right behind it, and if you look over here, it's still pretty bad. And that's not even with, the sun right behind it either. On the other side, we've got green fringings. So clearly there's an issue here with the lens. Now, whether or not this is actually a faulty unit, I don't know. What actually happened is I sent this lens back, and then I've got some more photos coming up with the new version, which should in theory be better because the chance of getting two dodgy lenses is unlikely, but we'll get to that in a minute. So of course you can just go into Lightroom, and you can go down to your manual lens corrections and you can just defringe, right? And that does a lot of it. You can get rid of a lot of the fringing this way. Still some though, and it's hard to get rid of it entirely. You can still see a lot here. No matter, even though this is up like 100% on both, there's still some fringing. Now if we go to the 2.8, still some fringing, but not as much. So this is on the 2.8. The lens costs about £200 here in the UK. Well, it's about $250 retail, but you can get it used for about 200 and much less actually. Yeah, it's not as bad. I mean, obviously you can see that the 1.8 is a lot sharper in the corners, 100%, compared to the 2.8, which is blurrier and clearly not as sharp. So here's another example here on some chains, and the one on the right is the 2.8, and if we zoom in here, and the one on the left is the 1.8. And this is a big difference. Now this was so bad that the company that I bought this from, Clifton Cameras, they said to me that the lens is most likely decentered because this amount of chromatic aberration is, unheard of, shouldn't really happen on a lens of this price. And I would agree with them. I think for a lens of this price, this is a lot of chromatic aberration, even for being wide open, white contrasted background. This is a lot. Here's another example of the chromatic aberration as well. So this tree, high contrast sky, chromatic aberration isn't too bad here, but this is out of focus. You can tell that this isn't quite in focus. Now when we go to this shot, again, slightly out of focus, wide open, 1.8, but look how purple this is. Do you think this is acceptable? I mean, I don't know. On a lens this price that's trying to market itself as having little chromatic aberration, I mean, seems pretty severe. Now we go to this one. This is f1.8 as well. So clearly, if you are in between focus points, this one's a lot more in focus here. So there's clearly not as much chromatic aberration as on this image, where it's out of focus, right? If we take a look at this branch, and we move to this image, and we take a look at the exact same branch, or tree trunk, or whatever you'd call that. It's a branch. It's clearly not as bad, but it's still not good. I mean, look, it's going to be difficult to remove. You're going to be having to do this on every single image you take on this lens. And for landscape photography, astrophotography, I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, I'm interested to know what you guys think. Have I just ended up with a dodgy lens? I don't know. So this is the first astro photo that I got with the 24mm 1.8, and you can probably tell just from your size down YouTube window the amount of purple fringing we're getting here. So if I zoom in on the stars, there's a noticeable amount. I mean, this is a lot, right? We can see that there's a lot of purple fringing. And it's not just on these brighter stars either, you know, it's pretty much everywhere. Now, you need to decide as an astrophotographer if this is going to be an issue for you. I mean, if you look at the edges, it's not too bad. You know, we've got some wings here on this star, some stretching, especially here as well. Overall, performance isn't too bad, but this chromatic aberration is pretty bad for me. And the reason this is a problem, and I know that you can just say, well, why don't you just remove it in the lens corrections? Well, I can turn up the amount of purple fringing, or defringing, and the issue we get here is this nebula. So this is a nebula here on the Orion constellation. This naturally is a gas cloud, so it has some red in it, which means when we defringe, we lose it. Now you can play around with what kind of purple you want to sort of get, so that works a bit better. But the problem is that we still get this haloing around the stars as well. So it's never going to be entirely perfect. And I know you could say, well, Jack, what do you expect from a lens of this price? You know, it's not going to be perfect. Well, I know, but still, I think for a lens that's advertised for astrophotography, this is just not that good. I mean, look, because when you change the color balance, you then lose the colors in this nebula, depending on what kind of scene you want. I mean, yes, you can go into Photoshop, I guess, and spend a lot of time changing it, but that's the problem. As a photographer, you know, we want to be minimizing the time we're spending editing these photos and try and get the best photos we can. So a few photos across, and I've got the 2.8. Now this one I've added some effects to, so let me take those off. Now this is open at 2.8, wide open, on a lens that costs £200 less than the 1.8. And in my opinion, this chromatic aberration is handled a lot better. I think overall, I was actually happier with the performance of the 2.8. I mean, if you look at the stars as well, you know, we get some stretching much further in, almost like right here in the frame rather than at the edges. But overall, it's still pretty good. I mean, I don't think that many people are going to, you know, pixel people this and have issues. I mean, if we look at the stars up here, right, this isn't actually that bad. But on the 1.8, we've got some major wings here. So is the 2.8 actually a better lens for astrophotography? It might be. So after getting all these tests, I sent these photos to the company that I bought the lens from, and they offered to send me a replacement because they felt like it was a decentered lens that had a fault. And then when the new one arrived, I didn't think it was much different. So let's have a look at some of these as well. So again, this is at 1.8, shooting towards the sun. Would you say that's much different to what we saw earlier on? I don't think so. Even here, I mean, obviously when you zoom in, it doesn't look so bad. But when you zoom out, you can see all the purple fringing on this sort of mesh metal wiring or whatever you want to call it. This tree here, again, lots of purple fringing, lots of green fringing. Still, lots of purple fringing. It seems like every situation you're going to get purple fringing. And then let's get to the astro stuff. So this was on the second lens. Now, admittedly, I think this looks a bit better than the first lens. However, the white balance is a bit cool here. So if we move it up, there we go. Still getting some pretty bad chromatic aberration on these stars. Better than the first lens, maybe. Still some wings on this one. Wings here as well. So, you know, Samyang saying that this lens is, I can't remember the exact quote, but you know, the one from the website, you know, it'll make you the master of astrophotography, little chromatic aberration, or little spherical and coma aberration. I mean, but okay, you know, you guys can make up your mind, and hopefully these examples have been useful. So as you can see from my tests, the Samyang 24mm 1.8 is definitely not the perfect lens for astrophotography. And it's certainly not as chromatic aberration free as people are making it out to be. Before buying this lens, I watched countless hours of reviews, so you can imagine why this bothers me now that I've got the lens. I had originally thought that maybe I was just super unlucky and was sent 2 bad units of this lens, but that's part of the problem. It's Samyang's quality control. But here's the thing, I went over to Flickr, and some people have issues even worse than mine. But here's the thing, I went over to Flickr, I mean, just take a look at the purple fringing on these. So if you're an astrophotographer looking to buy this lens, you need to decide whether or not this chromatic aberration is going to cause issues for you. Personally, if I was taking astrophotography really seriously, I would think again about this lens. The fact that one, I don't know if this is actually a widespread issue and that most people actually get this kind of chromatic aberration taking photos, or if it's just a quality control issue, and if you don't get a good copy, this is the kind of imagery you can expect. So will you play the Samyang lottery? You're either going to get a lens like these reviewers who make out there's no chromatic aberration at all, or you're going to get one like me and like the other people on Flickr that clearly have a lot of chromatic aberration. And that's pretty much it from me on this lens. I don't really have anything else to say about it. It's really important for me to be honest with you guys and show you the kind of images that I'm getting from this lens. And yeah, see you next time.